Hi, I'm Amy Willis with AdamSmithWorks.
Hi, I'm Pete Boettke.
Pete, thanks for joining us today to take your stab at the Smith questionnaire. If you're ready, we'll just get going.
I'm very excited to try this. Yep.
Awesome.
By the way, Adam Smith. I love Adam Smith. This is my copy of Adam Smith that I got when I was an undergraduate, and I have to hold it together with tape. And every time I open it up to the different pages, it's falling apart. So if anyone out there can tell me how to fix books that are torn apart, I would love to hear it. Because right now, masking tape.
Or if they pick up the pieces of your book
Yes.
along your walk, that'd be good. All right, here we go, Pete. Are you ready?
Yep.
First question. Would you rather be loved or lovely?
Oh, that's a fascinating question, actually. I think that I'd rather be lovely.
Okay. I think you may have already answered this next question, but I'm going to give you a chance to answer it anyway. Wealth of Nations or Theory of Moral Sentiments?
So I love the Wealth of Nations. I love the Theory of Moral Sentiments. I don't see a disjoint between the two of them. And so I've always liked Hayek's discussion in Individualism, True and False, when he actually says that all the social psychologists in the world would do well if they actually looked at the wealth of nations, is what he points to as and at that tome, the Wealth of Nations is a better treatment of human psychology than all of their social psychologies. But I agree that the Theory of Moral Sentiments actually has become a book that has taught me more over the years than I thought it would when I first started studying economics. So I love them both.
All right, fair enough. If Adam Smith had a dog, what kind of dog would it be?
Oh, so I'm prone to corgis. So it would be a corgi, and he would name him Abby, which is what my dog is.
Okay, I was going to say Abby. All right, good enough. All right, Pete, what do you think?
Abigail, because it has to be, appropriate language.
Yeah, 18th century appropriate language. Fair enough. All right, what do you think is the best antidote to the torpor induced by the division of labor?
More division of labor. So, what do I mean by that? Well, I think that the tremendous increases in the productivity of mankind offset a lot of the difficulties that are associated with misery and poverty and drudgery of work. And I think that as we get wealthier, we can afford more to recognize the dignity in work. And so I think that the expansion and division of labor and the expansion of trade internationally. So I'm very nervous about any kind of anti-globalization backlash, because I actually want to see trade grow farther and farther and farther. So I think Smith's virtuous cycle of that the division of labor is limited by the extent of the market. You grow the market, you get a more extensive division of labor. You use more extensive division, you get a bigger market. I don't think it has an unending sequence. The only unending sequence to it is human jealousy and tribal mentalities, which then force us away from trade. So I would love to see the growth and expansion of productive specialization and peaceful social cooperation through exchange. So more of it, not less.
I like it. More.
More of
All
it.
right.
More of it. Yes.
Here's the important question. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Do you think Adam Smith would rather fight one horse-sized duck or 100 duck-sized horses?
That's a great question, because we're talking about a behemoth of an enemy that's slow moving and not very good versus a nimble adversarial enemy, right? Which is like the invisible hand. So what would happen is the 1,000 ducks could take us out, because we have no ability to fight off one front. And so we would be attacked in our rear, we'd be attacked in our side, we'd be on top of our head, whatever. I know ducks don't fly, but they climb up our back or whatever, right? So, they would do something like that. Or, but the horse, that just goes like, like that. And so, yeah. So think about that, just to think about history, made up history, because I don't actually know if it's really true. It's what I was always taught, but I have no idea if it's true, which is Hannibal versus General Fabian, right? And so Hannibal had the
The elephants.
elephant,
Yeah.
and what Fabian's big strategy was to, you know, encircle it with little like troops and then attack it rather than stand in that line and get marched over. So Adam Smith, being alert to the opportunity to have various different, you know, nimble adversaries, would much prefer to have the giant horse that's slow and moving. Even though it's a very difficult enemy, I could somehow take it on by maybe, in fact, enlisting those ducks to my side to take on the little ducks to take it on.
I have an awesome image right now of Boettke's duck army going on. That's going to stick with me.
Yeah.
All right. Smith says that one of the times that we experience sympathy is when we share an appreciation for the same piece of literature or music or work of art. So what should people read, listen to, or watch to feel sympathy with you?
Oh, well, right now, The Last Dance. About Michael Jordan, because everything about that is exactly like in my wheelhouse of my age of going through all that stuff. Yeah, so there's a couple things there. And maybe it makes me a bad person, right? So when it comes to sports is like my main metaphor of life. And then I'll talk about music and stuff in a minute. But sports is my main metaphor. But my wife always makes fun of me because I never cheer for the underdog. I actually hate when the underdog wins because, like, think about a tennis tournament. If like the number one seed gets upset in the second round, the guy who upsets him is going to lose in the next round. So I don't want to see that, right? Because, you know, that means that I miss out on watching Nadal play, you know, Federer or something like that. And instead I got Nadal playing, you know, some journeyman kind of player or whatever. So unless the underdog is clearly going to be like the next star, then I love it, you know? So like a young Kobe Bryant, you know, all of a sudden being good was like, oh yeah, you can see this, it's going to happen. Or a young Roger Federer defeating Pete Sampras at Wimbledon. It was like, oh my God, Federer's on the rise. His game is so beautiful and everything like that. So that's one. I love the front runners. So my favorite athletes in modern times have been Michael Jordan, Roger Federer, Derek Jeter, right? And so, you know, that's okay. So people are going to hate that. When I was younger, you know, favorite players were, you know, Dr. J, you know, Magic Johnson, Larry Bird. Okay. All right. So I like the guys who win. And I also switch. So I hated Detroit forever. And then I moved to Rochester, Michigan, where I taught during the time period that they were winning their championships. And so then I was like, oh yeah, the Detroit Pistons are awesome, you know, like that. And so, yeah, so I'm very much a fair weather fan for the champion. So last year I was wearing my Washington Nationals gear, you know, at the end of the season. Whereas, you know, when the season started, I was like, you got tickets to go to a Washington Nats game. I was like, yeah, I don't want to do that.
I got
Anyway,
other
so
stuff.
sports, that's one. So, and I like front runners. I love excellence, right? Excellence, like so. So that also carries through in like what I view as you know, unusual people that succeed in like all different walks of life. I love combinatorial thinkers, people that blend and mix different genres and then as a result move forward. In music, I like weird syncopations. So here's something weird about me. Besides playing sports, I played the drums when I was a kid,
Oh.
and I like you know, art rock kind of things from the 70s, right? I mean, it's not like I didn't enjoy like, you know, country rock and standard rock like Led Zeppelin or whatever like that, but I always also like these like funky bands that were big glamorous type, you know, bands like Emerson, Lake and Palmer, or fusion music like jazz fusion music like Pat Metheny or people like that. Genesis, I was a huge Genesis fan. I went to so many different concerts by Genesis or Peter Gabriel, and Yes, you know, the band Yes, not Yes, you know, but the band Yes, and Bill Buford, who was the drummer for that. And so I followed drummers, and I really liked them. So you know, Ginger Baker was the drummer for,
Yeah.
you know, and that's like classic rock, and that's very good. And he was like an interesting drummer, but he wasn't. I mean, or Ringo Starr was just a very solid drummer, right? All right, but like someone like Carl Palmer or whatever was an experimental drummer,
Hmm.
and or Bill Buford, who was the drummer for Yes, and then also on Genesis when they went on tour. And so I always like these weird syncopations. So like if you actually look at some of Genesis's songs before they became more poppy, they did like weird things with syncopations. And among modern people that have done this is like someone like Tori Amos, who's very
Mm.
interesting. So here's the thing, like I'm very weird. So if you look at my record collection, or that dates me, my digital collection on my iTunes, you'll see everything from like Betsy Smith and Billie Holiday or whatever, all the way up to Dr. Dre, and even Dr. Dre instrumental. I don't know how many people have ever done that. Why would I ever listen to an instrumental of Dr. Dre? It's because of these weird syncopations, right? Even though they're doing it with the various different machines, they're taking the beats and they're changing them away from like a typical like Ringo Starr sort of 4-beat kind of rock song,
Hmm.
or the Rolling Stones or whatever, just boom boom boom, like, which is fine, but these guys do these weird syncopations. Now, why I find that fascinating is because I think it's kind of like going back to the sports thing. What fascinates me about the game of basketball is that it's a team game played by individuals. So the individuals have to actually be outstanding.
Hmm.
And notice that when I mentioned before, I mentioned individuals. I didn't mention teams. So like Michael Jordan, just amazing. And anyone, by the way, who's watching The Last Dance, who doesn't understand what they're watching, which is the greatest basketball player that ever lived, including the basketball players today. I watched last night the finals. This is how bad my life is. The finals between the Golden State Warriors and the Cleveland Cavaliers in 2015. I have tremendous appreciation for Steph Curry. It's phenomenal what he can do with a basketball. All right, and I think the world of him. He ain't Michael Jordan, right? LeBron James is an amazing physical specimen, but he can't do all the things that Michael Jordan can do. He can do a lot of things, but he can't do the things Jordan could do. And so I think, and they changed the rules of basketball, which made it easier for a Steph Curry
Mm.
or for a LeBron James, where it was much difficult. But what's fascinating about that is Jordan becomes Jordan when he recognizes again that it's a team game played by excellent individuals, and they all fit like pieces in a puzzle. And what was fascinating in the different things of Phil Jackson is that he played for the Knicks and studied under a coach, Red Auerbach, not Red Auerbach, shit, I can't remember his name now, but someone out there will remember the name. But he was a coach of the Knicks, and they played this fluid game with these different players, and they even fit like superstars into that, like Fraser, and then also Earl of Pearl Monroe and stuff. And so Jackson learned his different little unique part that he could play. And when he got to coach the Bulls, he put together these unique pieces in a way, and then took an old offense from like years ago and threw it into this new thing. Now, just think about the combinatorial thinking that's involved. I have the greatest athlete in the world. I'm going to put together a string of people who all fill a role that's needed in all of these things that, if on their own, are not going to be able to fit together. I'm going to put them all together. I'm going to put an offense in on them, which changes the way they do it. And so to me, Phil Jackson is like a great jazz musician, right? Or like Miles Davis or something like that. Like, so, when you listen to Miles Davis or John Coltrane, what you hear is not only their ability to play their instrument, which is off the charts, right? I mean, you hear someone play a trumpet, even Wynton Marsalis play a trumpet. He doesn't sound like Miles Davis, right? Miles Davis just sounds better, right? Or something different. And I mean, better is not maybe the right word, but there's clearness or crispiness or whatever. But what's the other thing about them? They know how to do these different combinatorial aspects, which make their music different. So you can take an old standard, like listen to John Coltrane or whatever, take like a song off the like TV shelf, right? And then him redo it, and then all of a sudden it's a different song. So to me, that's what I like to hear in music. That's what I like to see in sports. It's what I like to see in movies. It's like, different genres mixed and matched. And then all of a sudden, like, what comes out of it is something that is timeless, like going all the way back to Shakespeare. We have, blood, money and sex or whatever in all these different stories, right? But at the same time, the way you combine them and mix them and match them ends up by telling a different tale. And so that's what fascinates me. So that's what someone would have to see: combinatorial thinking in all these different genres, and appreciation of the aesthetic of excellence.
Cool. I think
Sorry.
that's very illustrative of your approach to doing economics and social science too. I mean, that's to me one of the hallmarks of the way that you work and think is whether it be combining different schools or methods within economics, but also other disciplines: sociology, psychology, social psych, all those things. That's what makes your work, I think, especially relevant. So,
Well,
your answer doesn't surprise me at all.
That's a very, very kind statement. I wish I could do that. I've been amazed at people that I've met or had the good fortune to meet over the years in terms of their lifetime learning aspects. So that's one of the things about Adam Smith that I would bring up again, which I think is very captured in Vernon Smith, which is that, if you look at the Liberty Fund collection of Adam Smith, it ranges all these different books. Yes, he's an economist, he's a philosopher, but he's also all these other things, plus a man of letters, he does, and so across the board, he's just a Renaissance person that's always learning and always adapting and adjusting and there's a great sense of joy, just like there is in Hume, in learning. I mean, Hume, there's also a sense of, irony and snarkiness and other kinds of things which make Hume so great. But Vernon Smith is one of these intellectuals. Eleanor Ostrom was one of them as well, where when you meet them, they're always like on the lookout for something that's not what they already know.
Yeah.
And I think Jim Buchanan was that way too. It's just that he was a more somber person, or a more quiet person. And so you don't see it like in the excitement of him saying like this. But I mean, when you would go to talk to him, and you'd sit down, and you have tea and whatnot, either Betty would bring it to you or later Joanne, you'd sit down and you'd have like coffee or tea with Jim. He was always like fascinated by some book he was reading and it was never like, oh, the latest article in the AER argues this, right? It was always something like slightly off, that he would talk to you about. And that's how Vernon is. Vernon's more likely to talk to you about an article in science than he is to talk to, or some article about anthropology or something like that, than he is about like the literature in economics is what these people took as given. Like, you have to be knowledgeable about what it is that you're in your discipline doing. Sure. But where your curiosity takes you is also to borrow ideas from all over the place. And so I think that that's, I'm not half as good at it as like those people are, but that's what always impressed me as like, my God, when you meet them, like, so actually I'll tell you a weird story, which is that Vernon Smith's the first person that I ever heard the name Temple Grandin named to me. And I heard it in the 1980s. Yeah. That's when Vernon told me about it. And it was about alternate and then a little bit later, I was at something with him in the 90s or whatever, and he showed that picture. There's that picture like of a woman that it could either be an old woman or it could be like and it was all about perspectivism or whatever. Yep. And he was like using that. And so it's through Vernon that I found out about this one book that Temple Grandin did, not the, seeing in pictures kind of thing, which everyone knows about, but there's a book on the unwritten rules of social intercourse or something like that, that title. It's co-written with somebody. And the reason is they're unwritten rules is because she had a difficult time reading social signs. So she had to take what normally we think of as unwritten rules, and she had to write them down. Wow. So that now she could understand what the rule was, to actually look at. And when you think about that, that's like, wow, like how fascinating are the things that we take for granted. And so this is one of the things that is really important, I think, to understand Smith or Hayek or any one of these people, is because they're trying to get us to think about rules of social interaction, which in many ways we take for granted because they've evolved from our past. But now, because they've been taken for granted, they get forgotten. So how do you recapture them? And then how do you legitimate them when they were legitimated earlier just by our, tacit consent to them because that's the way we did things. And now all of a sudden you're trying to make us have a rational justification for things that previously we just accepted because God told me, mom told me, whatever, right? And so I don't know, it's all that, to me, that's kind of fascinating. So I don't know.
Hey man, if mom says it, it's got to be
That's
important,
true.
right?
Yeah.
All right, you brought up David Hume. So we know that Hume was Smith's BFF back in the day.
Yeah.
So if Smith were around today, who do you think his best friend would be?
Oh, wow. That's I'm a little stumped on that one.
You can come back to it if you want.
George Stigler used to have a shirt that said Adam Smith's best friend. Do you know this? Yeah. So it wouldn't be Russ Roberts because Russ Roberts is more like, like tied to Adam Smith, right? So part of Hume's BFF status was that he was a gadfly to Smith and also like a troll. Like, so he knew how to like poke at him, right? So
David Hume on Twitter, that's something to think about, right?
Yeah, David Hume on Twitter would be hilarious. I don't know the answer to that. It would be fascinating to ask the guy, that wrote the book on the two, on Smith and Hume, and their friends.
Dennis Rasmussen.
Yeah, Dennis Rasmussen. I'm trying to think who could be, maybe Smith's biggest gadflies at the moment are all the people that are trying to make him out to be something that he wasn't, which is some kind of form of communitarian, resource egalitarian, things like that. So maybe he would have fun hanging out and poking at him and him responding back. I tend to think of him as somebody who he was a big clubs person, right?
Yep.
And he liked conversation and debate, discussion. So yeah, so it is fascinating to think about the attention Smith has been getting for the last 10 years. So that's actually pretty new and interesting and fascinating. So it's starting with Emma Rothschild, but like a whole bunch of other people. So I just watched, in fact, I'm reading a really cool book by Sam Fleischacker.
Me too.
Yeah. So are you reading this book on being me, being you? Yes. So what's fascinating about this question of empathy and all of that, I attended his webinar about the book, and so in that light, thinking about how who Smith would want to be interlocutors with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm mumbling, but George Stigler used to have the shirt, so he claimed to be Smith's best friend.
I like that. Maybe we can find a picture of Stigler wearing the shirt. I don't know. I've heard the story, but I don't know that I've seen a picture.
I saw one very recently, so I'm pretty sure that you could get it.
Yeah. All right. Sounds good. All right. Last question. Are you ready?
Yeah. Yep.
What does your impartial spectator look like?
On my good days, my impartial spectator looks like my wife, Rosemary. On my bad days, my impartial spectator looks like any number of coaches that I had over the years that told me that I was doing the wrong thing and that I'll be lucky if I get in the game ever again. So. Oh no. So no, I mean, I think that one of the great things about my life is that I met my wife when I was very young, and we grew up together, and we're best friends, and her judgment is always the better judgment. I admit that. When I don't, and she loves to say to me, Pete, why didn't you just listen to what I had to say? Like that. So on my good days, I listen to Rosemary, and Rosemary is my guide and my conscience on how to actually act towards other people and all of that. And so, I mean that very, very sincerely. Yeah. Yeah. On the bad days, as I said, I'm running wind sprints or I'm trying to make others run wind sprints.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they like, get on the line. You're going to run, until your feet bleed or something like that. So, yeah. So, but yeah. But
All
yeah.
right. Well, I
But if
am lucky.
anyone can help me fix the binding on my book,
That's
I
the
need
real
to save.
question.
I need to save because this has all of my special pages marked to it, and I don't want to.
Yeah.
I'm lazy, so I don't want to take the Liberty Fund version and match them page by page because they're also not the same
No, I
pages.
know.
This is the.
We'll pretend you didn't say that, Pete, but it's okay.
I have a Liberty Fund one, and I do that. My theory of moral sentiments is all Liberty Fund. This is the George Stigler volume that came out from Chicago in '76. So it's funny, last thing about empathy. The one thing that would also capture is someone should visit my library and see which of the books that no longer have a binding to them.
Yeah.
Because I used to go shopping for books with my friend Dave Perchicko every Friday when we were in graduate school. We went used book shopping. There wasn't online book shopping.
Yeah.
But neither one of us were looking to buy collector's editions. We were trying to find cheap paperbacks
Yeah.
to be able to like build our collection out. So my books are all like, the ones I work with are all paperback books.
Yeah.
And as a result, I've ended up by destroying them over the years. And it's very easy to see which ones are the ones that I've read the most of
Yep.
because you see that. And so here's like my copy of the Constitution of Liberty, also held together by that. And if you looked at my copy of Human Action, of Individualism, Economic Order, of The Road to Serfdom, Man, Economy, and State by Murray Rothbard, these are all like shredded books. Whereas at the same time, if you saw like, my copy of, I don't know, like, Arohan the Brew or something, that's still in pretty good shape. It's not,
Yeah.
it's been cracked, but it hasn't been torn apart. But Don Lavoie, my teacher, told me that you should read books by tearing them apart. And I took that to heart, and I interact with these books. I love them. And they're part of my world. And I think actually probably that would, even more than sports, if you went through my library and looked at the ones which were torn apart, you would see the books that have influenced me the most.
I think that's a great point. I do that when I go to a new place. That's the first thing I want to look at is the books that are on somebody's shelves, right? So
Yeah.
that's a great way to end our conversation. Pete, thanks for taking the time to visit with us today, and we'll hope to do it again soon.
Okay. Thank you.